They didn't bring handcuffs. They brought a clipboard. Two strangers in white coats rang my doorbell, smiled politely, and told me my husband had concerns about my mental health. Before I knew it, I was being escorted into a van with tinted windows. Neighbors stared, whispering. I tried to explain I'm fine. I'm not sick, but my words were dismissed as denial. That day, I realized madness isn't just something you fall into. It's something someone can force upon you with enough lies and enough power. My name is Julia Carter, 33 years old. I worked as a graphic designer, loved hiking on weekends, and have been married to Richard for almost 7 years. We weren't perfect, but I believed in us. I believed in him. We shared Sunday breakfasts, laughed over late-night movies, and talked about starting a family. My mother used to say Richard was steady as a rock. I thought she was right until the rock crumbled and revealed rot beneath it. Looking back, it started small. Richard would joke about me being forgetful. He'd move my keys, then tell me I must have misplaced them. He'd insist I hadn't paid a bill when I knew I had. Little comments. You've been so tired lately, maybe you're not yourself. I brushed them off. Love makes you excuse the cracks. But what I didn't know then was that every seed of doubt he planted was part of something bigger. He wasn't teasing me. He was building a case. The night it all clicked, I was cleaning his office at home. That's when I found an email chain left open on his laptop. Love notes, dinner plans, hotel reservations. A woman named Claire. My chest caved in as I scrolled, seeing months of messages, each one proof of betrayal. When I confronted him, he didn't yell. He didn't apologize. He just smiled coldly and said, "No one will believe you, Julia, not after what we've documented." That word documented echoed like a verdict I hadn't even heard yet. 2 weeks later, the men in white coats came. Richard had filed reports that I was unstable, paranoid, seeing things that weren't there. He told them I'd accused him of impossible affairs, that I was endangering myself. My protests only made me look exactly like the profile he painted. They admitted me to a mental hospital on his recommendation. I sat there in a sterile white room, my wedding ring still on my finger, wondering how love had become a weapon sharp enough to cut me out of my own life. The first night, the hospital taught me its language, clipped sentences, locked doors, the soft hiss of vents that never stop. A nurse with kind eyes asked if I knew why I was here. I told her the truth: my husband was hiding an affair and needed me to disappear. She wrote something on the chart and nodded the way people nod when they're taught not to argue. I learned quickly that sanity isn't a sound you make. It's a shape you hold, so I held it. I spoke slowly, asked for water, folded the blanket with careful hands. When they offered pills to help me sleep, I placed them on my tongue, swallowed, and later spit them into a tissue behind the privacy of the bathroom door. A quiet war had begun, and every small choice was a trench I could survive in. Hospitals forget things. People, even careful ones, leave crumbs. On day 3, during vitals, a junior clinician left my file angled just enough for me to read a line. Collateral informant. Spouse reports escalating paranoia, delusions of infidelity. Recommends 72-hour hold plus evaluation for longer stay. Escalating. Delusions. Words chosen for permanence. Later, during a group session, I kept my eyes on the floor and listened. A woman grieving a breakup. A man whose boss called him unstable to avoid a lawsuit. A teenager who didn't speak at all. I memorized how people were translated into diagnoses. That night, I built a memory palace. Every corridor a drawer, every staff name a hook, every policy a key. If Richard had turned my life into a case file, I would turn the case file into a map. Her name was Nurse Amara. She noticed the way I lined up my plastic cup precisely at mealtimes. She noticed I thanked every staff member by name. "You manage control by making order," she said softly as she checked my pulse. I didn't answer, but she continued, "Patients have rights. You can request copies of your records." The sentence sounded like a door opening. When I asked how, she slid a form across my tray. The next morning routine, impersonal, official. I filled it in block letters. Under who referred you, I wrote Richard Carter's spouse, and felt something steady inside me take root. Records are stubborn, they don't flirt, they don't gaslight. They either exist or they don't, and if they exist, they can be compared. We were allowed one supervised phone call a day. Most patients tried family. I tried a number I knew by heart. Lydia, my oldest friend, a paralegal who could make paper speak. I kept my voice even. I need 3 things, I said. Richard's recent credit card statements, the deed on our house, and any power of attorney documents he might have filed. Lydia inhaled sharply but didn't ask questions. I'll move, she said. Before the line clicked, I added, there's a woman, Claire. Search his email for that name. When I hung up, my hands shook not from fear, but from the current of a plan beginning to hum. That night, Amara delivered a thin packet, admission notes, a copy of Richard's written concern, dates that didn't match his story. He'd reported 6 months of decline. My calendar said otherwise. 6 months ago, we were backpacking coastal trails, 10 miles a day. My photos had timestamps. Facts have timestamps. The psychiatrist evaluated me on day 7. I answered every question like a metronome steady, precise, unmarred by panic. The psychiatrist evaluated me on day 7. I answered every question like a metronome steady, precise, unmarred by panic. We'll discharge you with outpatient follow-up. The paper slid across the desk like a verdict overturned. On the ride home, the city looked freshly carved, edges sharp, colors overexposed. Richard met me at the door with a performance-ready smile. See? You're okay, he said, as if he hadn't lit the fire. I smiled back like a woman who'd survived weather. In my bag were copies of my records. In my phone sat a silent text from Lydia. Found charges for a boutique hotel. Twice weekly. Claire Weston listed as client. Also a draft POA he saved but never filed. Call me. I poured tea, set the cup on its saucer, and let the steam fog the glass between us. He thought the hospital would break me. He didn't realize it had taught me its rules, and now I could write my own. Richard thought I'd return home grateful. He cooked dinner, poured wine, and asked about my treatment, with a voice dipped in sympathy. But lies have a smell. They linger, sweet and rotten at the same time. While he twirled pasta on his fork, I pictured the credit card slips Lydia had mentioned, the boutique hotel, Claire Weston's name written in digital ink. Every time he smiled, I filed it next to the word perjury. He thought this was reconciliation. I knew it was evidence in disguise. That night, I waited until his breathing deepened into sleep. Then I pulled out the hospital packet Amara had given me, laying the pages under a lamp like relics. Spouse reports delusions of infidelity. The phrasing was surgical, precise. If I showed Lydia this, paired with hotel charges and emails, the narrative would collapse. I tucked the documents into a folder labeled insurance policies. He never touched those. For the first time since the ambulance doors closed, I felt the wheel turn in my direction. I typed her name into social media, fingers steady. Claire Weston, 31, marketing consultant. Photos of weekend brunches, a dog with glossy fur, wine glasses clinking. And Mayor Richard, cropped in the corner of a group shot, his hand on her lower back like it belonged there. She didn't need to hide it. She didn't need to. To her, I was already erased. But erasure leaves fingerprints. I screenshotted everything, date stamped each file, and emailed them to Lydia with the subject line. Do not delete. The next morning, I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. He scanned his phone while I poured juice. He didn't notice the way I placed a recorder under the fruit bowl, capturing his casual words. I only pushed for admission because you scared me, he said. Scared. I filed the word beside delusion and paranoia. Evidence grows like ivy. It starts in cracks and spreads until it covers the whole wall. I smiled at him with calm eyes. The kind that look empty but are actually cataloging every breath. Lydia called at noon. Julia, listen. I have a contact in probate court who can subpoena medical and financial records if this goes to trial. But you need more his voice, his intent. My eyes went to the recorder under the fruit bowl, still quietly blinking. "I'll get it," I said. After we hung up, I stood at the window watching Richard leave for work. He thought the house was his castle. He didn't know it had already become my archive. Richard started calling during office hours. At first, it was sweet. "How are you feeling?" Then sharper. "You are taking your meds, right?" I let the calls ring out, my hands folded in silence. Each voicemail was a rope, his words coiling tighter, betraying his obsession with keeping me sick. I saved every file. One day, he'd hear his own voice read back to him in a courtroom, stripped of charm, naked in cruelty. I went back to St. Mary's, not as a patient, but as an investigator. Amara led me through the staff corridor, her eyes flicking nervously at cameras. "Your file has Richard's handwriting all over it," she whispered, sliding copies into my bag. I touched the ink, the words, "paranoid delusions," penned by the man who kissed me goodnight. It wasn't just betrayal, it was authorship of my madness. I left the hospital with trembling hands, but a spine forged in steel. That evening, I created a new account, faceless, nameless. I messaged Claire. "Do you know he still lives with his wife?" Minutes later, she replied with a single word. "What?" I smiled in the glow of the screen. Seeds, once planted, have no master. Whether she denied it or believed, it didn't matter. A crack had formed in Richard's second life, and I didn't need to swing the hammer. Gravity would do the rest. Richard came home drunk, the scent of whiskey trailing him like a confession. "You've been distant," he slurred, pacing the living room. I sat still, watching, letting the silence pull words from him. "You'll ruin everything if you keep this up." "Ruin what?" I almost laughed. He had built a tower of lies so fragile that even my quiet could shake it. I pressed record under my robe pocket. His anger filled the room, but it was my calm that documented every syllable. I stood before the bathroom mirror that night, studying the woman staring back. Julia, 35, writer, wife, patient, investigator. For months, I'd been the subject of Richard's story, an unreliable narrator trapped in his script. But now, with files, screenshots, recordings, I was writing a new draft. I whispered to my reflection, "He tried to make you a ghost. Instead, you'll be his historian." And historians, I knew, decide how stories survive. When I first sat across from Daniel Mercer, a lawyer known for quiet ferocity, I feared he would dismiss me as the unstable wife. Instead, he leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You have recordings, documents, witnesses? Then you don't have a case, you have an avalanche." His words lodged in my chest like an anchor of hope. For the first time, someone wasn't diagnosing me. He was preparing me. Daniel asked for everything. Eviction notice copies, medical records with Richard's handwriting, bank withdrawals, even text messages Claire had unknowingly confirmed. I handed him a folder so thick it groaned under its own weight. He smiled grimly. "Julia, your husband didn't just overreach. He built a gallows for himself, and you're handing me the rope." I exhaled, shaky but fierce. The rope was mine all along. Richard stormed into the house one evening, eyes bloodshot. "Why were you at a law office today?" he demanded, voice brittle with panic. My silence unnerved him more than denial ever could. He shouted louder, but his words trembled, hollow. He had always performed control, but now it was theater without an audience. I turned, locked eyes with him, and simply said, "You should be careful what you sign, Richard." His face drained of color. He knew I knew. 2 weeks later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Claire had left her job abruptly. No explanation, no farewell emails, just vanished. My anonymous message had bloomed into doubt, and doubt is poison. Richard tried to call her at night, pacing the kitchen, voice cracking through desperate voicemails. "Pick up, Claire, don't do this to me." I listened from the hallway, the sound sweeter than any lullaby. His secret world was dissolving without me lifting another finger. One quiet morning, Richard found a thick envelope taped to the front door. He tore it open, his lips moving silently as he read. A subpoena. Daniel had filed. I watched his hands shake, Watched the man who once controlled every detail of my life crumple under the weight of official paper. You wouldn't dare, he whispered, but it wasn't a question. It was a prayer he knew would go unanswered. The day of the first hearing, I stepped into the courtroom wearing a navy dress that whispered dignity. Richard sat across the aisle, jaw tight, but his eyes darted like a trapped animal. When the judge entered, silence fell heavy. Daniel laid out the evidence: forged medical request, financial records siphoning my accounts, photos of the apartment abandoned by Claire. Each item landed like a hammer strike. Richard sweated through his shirt before a word even left his mouth. His lawyer tried to argue that I had mental instability and was imagining connections. But when Daniel pulled out the eviction notice with Richard's handwriting, requesting medical confinement, the courtroom gasped. I saw the judge's expression freeze into quiet disgust. The narrative Richard had spun for years began to unravel right in front of him. And I, who had once doubted my own mind, watched his story collapse under the weight of truth. Unexpectedly, Claire herself was summoned. She appeared nervous, thinner, eyes hollow. Under oath, her voice cracked as she admitted, "Yes, Richard asked me to write letters to help with Julia's confinement. He said she was dangerous, but she never was." The silence that followed was crushing. Richard's face went pale, his composure snapping. For the first time in our entire marriage, he looked small. And in that smallness, I saw my freedom reflected back at me. When the judge spoke, it was with a finality that echoed. Richard was ordered to pay restitution, his credibility shattered, his future employment prospects dimmed. The court acknowledged my wrongful confinement attempt as abuse. "Mrs. Rowe," the judge said firmly, "you are owed not only compensation, but the recognition of your dignity." Tears pricked my eyes, not from grief, but from the sharp, unfamiliar taste of justice. The rope Richard built had indeed become his own noose. That evening, I walked out of the courthouse into the golden light of sunset. The city hummed around me, alive and indifferent, but inside I felt a profound stillness. For years, Richard's shadow had dictated my steps. Now, the shadow was gone. He had tried to silence me with lies, with papers, with confinement. Instead, I had turned his weapons into my liberation. And as the night settled in, I whispered to myself, "Never again. My story belongs to me." If you like this video, please comment and subscribe.